And for more events, do check out our website, stanfordwomen.org, or pick up one of our event calendars at the registration table. And now I would like to say a few words about our speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She is an accomplished and multifaceted psychologist and educator, and I'm going to attempt to touch briefly on some of her credentials and accomplishments in this introduction. Kelly received her PhD in psychology from Stanford, and since then she's become a leading expert on the mind and body relationship. She now teaches for the School of Medicine and the Stanford Center for Compassion and Altruism Research. Kelly received a number of teaching awards, including Stanford University's highest teaching honor, which is the Walter J. Gores Award. Her popular public courses through Stanford Continuing Studies program include the Science of Willpower and the Science of Calm Mind, and they demonstrate the applications of psychological science to personal health and happiness, as well as organizational success and social change. Kelly's upcoming book, The Science of Willpower, is going to be published by Penguin in about a year. Explores cutting-edge research of self-control, stress, and what it takes to make successful change. And she will give us an exciting glimpse into that book today. Dr. McGonigal's work has been covered widely by the media, including CBS Evening News, US News and World Report, CNN.com, the Oprah Magazine, and many others. She is also a frequent source of expert advice and commentary for various media outlets, including New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC.com, Time, Women's Health, and many more. In 2010, Forbes named her one of the 20 most inspiring women to follow on Twitter. And now, without further ado, I present to you Dr. Kelly McGonigal.
Thank you. I know that last bit of the bio always sounds so impressive until you get to the end, the on Twitter part. You're one of the most inspiring people to follow, period. So here we are, 3 weeks into January almost. How many of you are still maintaining a New Year's resolution that you set? Anyone? Still holding on? Good, good. Now the rest of you, did you set one and it's gone? No. Yeah, that's the real pro way to give up on a New Year's resolution, is abandon it before January 1st. Don't worry about that. Well, so you don't have to have a New Year's resolution to get something out of tonight's talk, I hope, because all of us have some sort of goal that we're making progress on, or something that we'd like to change. And today's talk is going to be about how it is we fail to do what we say we want to do, and how we let ourselves down when we have these goals for change for our own lives. And I want to start with a thought experiment. Okay, so I want you to imagine that now, see, I saw what you guys got for dessert. You got these little tiny pieces of cake, and this is not a big enough dessert to inspire guilt in anyone. So I want you to imagine a huge piece of chocolate cake. And let's say maybe you have a goal to maintain your health or to lose weight. I would like to know, do you think it would help if while you're staring at this delicious, huge piece of chocolate cake, would it help you maintain your self-control if you were to think how awful you would feel after you ate the cake? I see some heads nodding yes. I see a lot of heads nodding yes. Do I see any heads nodding no? Okay, good. We have some debate. That's excellent. Actually, this study has been done by a number of researchers, including some psychologists at the University of Southern California, where they put people who are watching their weight in front of a giant piece of chocolate cake from the Cheesecake Factory. And some of them are asked to imagine how bad they will feel about themselves, how guilty they're going to feel if they eat it. And then after they've spent some time imagining this, they're given the opportunity to eat as much as they want. And then the researchers time how many bites they take in the first 5 minutes, how much of the cake do they eat. And what researchers have found is that if you think about how ashamed you'll feel or how guilty you'll feel after you eat it, you're half as likely to resist it as if you don't think about how bad you're going to feel afterwards. This actually surprised the researchers themselves. I think most of us have, at least at some point in our life, have had the intuition that guilt or shame can kind of keep us in line. And if we sort of use guilt against ourselves, we can maintain our motivation. And the research pretty strongly says that guilt and shame do not work. Any ideas why? Especially those of you who were nodding your head no, this was not going to help. Any ideas why guilt or shame might not help you resist this cake? Yes?
Because the worse you feel about yourself, the less efficacy you have about making a change.
Yeah, so you're preemptively feeling bad about yourself, and then what do you do when you feel bad about yourself? Where do you turn? You're gonna have to feel, right? Yeah, so the worse you feel about yourself, the less likely you are to even remember that you had a goal. You're just gonna be scanning the environment for something to help fix those feelings. It doesn't make any sense logically, but it's actually what we do. Any other reasons why guilt or anticipated shame might not help? There's one more really key reason. Yes, sir.
You already assume that you've done it, so
Yeah.
you've already beaten it in your mind. So.
That is a really good answer. Yeah, so he's suggesting that you've already imagined eating it, and that's going to help make it real. Researchers actually didn't even look at that, but I think that is an excellent hypothesis, that once you've envisioned yourself doing something, it's much harder then to hold yourself back from doing it. Yeah, good point. One more, yes?
Does it affect brain chemistry, like endorphins or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially one brain chemical we'll talk about later on that makes us crave something. And in fact, what researchers found is that the people who imagined feeling guilty or ashamed, they anticipated that the cake would taste better than the people who did not imagine how guilty or ashamed. That when we anticipate guilt, we actually start to amplify the expectation of pleasure. And even people who said before the experiment started that they didn't like chocolate cake at all, if they were assigned to imagine guilt, they actually expected that the cake would make them happy, even though previously they had said that they didn't like cake. And just one of the ways that guilt and shame don't work. So this is just one way that we can have a good intention, and then by trying to achieve that intention, we can actually sabotage ourselves. So I'm going to talk tonight about 5 of these mistakes that we make in ways that we are trying to help ourselves make a change, but actually are undermining our success. And I'm going to kind of give away the store in the beginning, just so you have a sense of what these mistakes are. And so the first is that we use guilt or shame as motivation. We think that that's going to be a really good way to keep ourselves in line. We also use our own virtuous behavior to license bad behavior. Another thing we'll talk about is how we confuse wanting for happiness, or we confuse wanting for liking. Another big mistake is that we try to control our inner world, our thoughts and our emotions and our cravings, instead of focusing on controlling our actions. And so we'll look at why that doesn't work. And then finally, we'll look at something that some of us are more susceptible to than others. But many of us have the sense that tomorrow we're going to be a completely different person. And there's kind of a gap between who we are now and who we think we're going to be tomorrow or in 10 years. Okay, so the first mistake is one we've already talked a little bit about why guilt and shame don't work. And dieting researchers call this the what the hell effect. That is, once you have already done something wrong, say you had a single bite of that chocolate cake, you say, what the hell? I've already been bad. I feel guilty about it. So I might as well really enjoy myself and eat the whole damn cake because I've already given in. And this what the hell effect shows up in a number of what we could call willpower challenges. So it was first identified, as I said, among dieters who feel really guilty whenever they have any sort of lapse in their diet. And it could be a really small transgression, or even just anticipating breaking a diet. And the worse that those dieters feel about that transgression or anticipating a transgression, the more likely they are to have a complete binge, to go completely off the wagon. But it's not just dieters. So other studies have shown that if you follow people and ask them to report how much they drink each night, and then how bad they feel the next morning, not how hungover they are, but how guilty they feel about how much they drank the night before, the worse people feel, the more guilty they feel about how much they drank the night before, the more they drink that night and the next night. It's as if they feel so bad about their drinking that they need to drink to feel better about themselves. Now, students, you all know at some point many of you were Stanford students, you remember what it's like to procrastinate on exams. And so researchers have found that a lot of students procrastinate on the first assignment or exam. That's very common in a quarter. But the worse students feel about their first act of procrastination predicts how long they procrastinate on the next exam. So the guiltier that students feel about putting off their studying, the more they put off their studying for the next exam. And researchers think this is because when they think about their own guilt and their shame for putting it off, they get a lot of anxiety about the exam, they feel bad about themselves, and just even thinking about the next exam is going to make them feel worse. And so to try to fix their feelings, they're just going to pretend like that exam or that assignment doesn't exist. And then finally, addicts. And if you look at any sort of addict, substance abuse, smoking, drinking, people who are in recovery, if they have even a minor lapse, the worse they feel about that lapse, the more likely they are to have a major relapse. And in all of these cases, it's the guilt, not the size of the initial transgression, that predicts whether that minor lapse will turn into a major relapse. Okay, so it really doesn't help to beat yourself up when you've had any sort of mistake or setback, willpower failure. And so I want to tell you about a study that's kind of a solution to this problem of guilt. These are researchers at Duke University who had this crazy idea that if guilt makes you give in once you've already given in, maybe you could prevent the what the hell effect by making people feel better about giving in. And so these researchers decided to bring people into the laboratory and do something that was guaranteed to make people feel guilty. They had a bunch of dieters eat an entire donut, no choice. So these were women who were watching their weight. They came into the laboratory, and they were told it was a study of mood on the effect of food on your mood. And they were asked to choose a donut they were going to eat, and they had 4 minutes to eat the whole thing. And they also had to drink a whole glass of water because they were trying to make them feel kind of full and stuffed to really push that guilt. Okay, so all the dieters had to eat a full donut. And then the second part of the study, which they were told was a completely separate study. And if you're ever in a study and the researchers tell you, oh, this is a completely separate study, they're lying. It's never a completely separate study. So the second part of the study was a taste test of 3 different types of candies. And the researchers brought in 3 bowls of peppermint York patties and Reese's Pieces and Skittles, so something that everyone would like. And they said, eat as many as you would like, but please sample everything just so that you can fill out this taste test report. Okay, so if the dieters experience the what the hell effect, you would expect they're feeling bad about themselves for eating the donut, and they're just going to inhale that candy at the taste test. Before they got to the taste test, half of these women were given a special message by the experimenter, a self-compassion message. The experimenter said, by the way, we've noticed a lot of participants in this study feel kind of guilty about eating a donut, and you might too. Okay, so the first part of self-compassion is just being mindful of any feelings you might have. So the experimenter was saying, hey, notice you might be feeling bad about eating the donut. The second part of the message was, you know, everyone indulges sometimes. And that's the second part of self-compassion, is a kind of common humanity to recognize that when you have a setback or when you have a failure, it's not revealing some unique weakness about what's wrong with you. It's just part of the human condition. Okay, so we have mindfulness of feelings and common humanity. And the third part of the message was, so don't be too hard on yourself. Try not to beat yourself up about this. And now we're going to move on to the next part of the study. Okay, so they were encouraged to really offer themselves some self-kindness instead of getting into the whole guilt trip. Then they had the taste test. And then after the taste test, researchers weighed the bowls of candy to see how much they'd eaten. And they found that the women who were given the self-compassion message ate only 28 grams of candy, compared to 70 grams of candy among the dieters who had not been told not to feel bad about indulging. This is really counterintuitive for a lot of people because they just said to the dieters, don't feel bad about indulging. And a lot of people would predict they're going to be the ones who then go on to eat more candy. But what that message was really doing was preventing this whole what the hell spiral, where people already felt bad and then had to fix their feelings by eating chocolate or candy. And just for a point of reference, for the 70 grams, a single Hershey's Kiss is 4.5 grams. So you can imagine eating like 15 Hershey's Kisses in a laboratory setting. So if you are susceptible to the what the hell effect, if you tend to beat yourself up when you have some setback on your goals, you can take that basic message of the study and you can create your own self-compassion message. So the first step, again, is just to be mindful of feelings. So the next time you have a setback and you're starting to do the whole self-beating thing, first step is just to notice, here I am feeling bad about the fact that I didn't do